morning, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us. Good morning, Shanita. Good morning, Christian. So happy to have you all this morning. Hi, Lee. So I'm seeing a B come in already, struggling to know where data is stored specifically, and the lack of a database can definitely make things a little cumbersome and confusing for folks. Good morning, Siobhan. Good morning, Jason. Good morning, Natalie. Another B coming in. We have an E. Good morning, Sarah. Jason coming in strong with an A. Seeing quite a few B's. Another A, B, A. A C coming in. Okay, okay. So I'm seeing quite a few B's so far, and then sprinklings of some of the other areas. Good morning, Ruth. Good morning, Taylor. We have another A with that consistent formatting. A little bit of B and E. Good morning, Lauren. B-ish. I love that. So not the entire B, just a little bit of sprinklings of some B. I feel that. I feel that. D, a little bit of A and B. Quite a few B's, quite a few B's. We'll leave this up for just a few more minutes as we wait for a few more folks to come in. Please, if you haven't done so yet and you're just joining us, go ahead and put a nice welcome into the chat along with your name, your organization, and then also answering the question on the screen of which data pain point have you been feeling in particular at your organization. Good morning, Penny. Good morning, Alicia. Good morning, Janice. So I think I'm seeing for the most part rounding out with a lot of B's, quite a few E's falling second, with sprinklings of A's, E's, and D's. Good morning, Carla. Good morning, Emily. We have another A, some more D and E, another B coming in. Good morning, Esmeralda. All right. So for folks who are still coming in, go ahead. Please feel free to keep hitting in the chat where you're falling in terms of more recent data pain points. But just to recap, again, I'm seeing a lot of B's. So we really are seeing some pain points when it comes to either ourself not knowing where some of our data is stored and hidden, or for the most part, I'm seeing a lot of our staff don't exactly know where specific data is stored, which I understand can definitely become a pain point if we are maybe a team of one or even a team of two. And so we become the ones that people are constantly coming to understand where can I find this and where can I find this. And then, of course, I also saw, I think, followed up after B was quite a few A's when it comes to consistent formatting. And so in one database, you may see dates and things recorded in one format, and then in another database or another Excel sheet, you may see the exact same information formatted entirely differently, which definitely becomes a pain point when you're trying to combine those data sets, and then you're having to reformat everything so that it's consistent. And then everything else is some A's, C's, and E's sprinkled throughout. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the session, but I want you to keep your responses and your answers in mind because we are going to come back to this. So very, very interesting to hear where some of our data pain points are, but also very insightful as we get into today's session and today's topic. So as we love to begin all of our coffee and quality sessions, I definitely want to cover our ground rules for this morning. So first and foremost, this is a safe space for everyone joining us today to share and learn amongst peers. I also ask and encourage you all to have an open mind and an open heart as we get into today's discussion and topics and conversation. And then you can always engage and participate by sharing your knowledge and experience either via the chat as we're going through the different topic and discussions today, or by coming off of mute and sharing verbally your different experiences and your knowledge. And then always, last but not least, this is entirely an invitation and is never an obligation for you to engage in the space and participate. So just grounding us with our ground rules this morning of how we're entering and showing up in the space today. And then this wouldn't be a complete coffee and quality session if we didn't include a shameless plug. So whether you are new to coffee and quality or whether you are a returning lurker and you're wanting to engage with us in a new or different way or in a deeper way, we do have our coffee and quality Microsoft Teams channel that is available for anyone to join. So if you are interested in joining, just go ahead and drop your email into the chat box. Jessica is my helpful right-hand woman this morning, so she'll make sure to catch your email address and add you to the Teams channel. So whether you're new to Coffee and Quality or if you maybe have been trying to join the Coffee and Quality Teams channel and you've been struggling, let us know that too so we can make sure we get you in there because it's a great place to network with peers who are also in the space of wanting to learn more and grow and develop as it pertains to their quality evaluation and data efforts. So if you're interested in engaging in that space, please go ahead and leave your email address and we'll catch it before the end of this session and add you into the channel. So as I promised, I do want to bring these back up. So this is, of course, just a friendly icebreaker to get things going in the chat, but also is a real kind of pulse check or baseline for me to understand where are some of our more common data pain points. And so, as I said earlier, we see quite a few Bs followed up by quite a few As, and then a sprinkling of some of the other C, D, and Es throughout. But regardless of what the data pain point is, what if I told you that all of these things and more could be mitigated and resolved with one standard document? And what if I also told you that this document or tool is easy to create? It requires few resources that are typically easy to access, if not free entirely. And you can customize this document to meet your organization needs. I feel like I'm a saleswoman right now, and I feel like someone needs to sponsor me. But this document that I'm talking about is a data dictionary. So today's entire conversation and entire session is all about demystifying data dictionaries so that we can begin to build a common language together. So for some of us, data dictionary may be a term that we're like, I've heard it, I've seen it, but I may not entirely know what a data dictionary is, how to best use it, or what it entails. And for others of us on this call, this may be the first time we're even hearing about a data dictionary, which, regardless of how you're entering this space, regardless of your prior knowledge, it is okay. I'll get you caught up to speed in the next 90 minutes or so. So hang tight, and we're going to debunk and demystify data dictionaries from beginning to end. So, of course, our agenda is going to walk us through what we're getting into today. In order for us to really start to understand how to best utilize a data dictionary, I want to start by understanding what a data dictionary is. So, we're going to go over some definitions, go over the purpose and the intent and how you can use a data dictionary. After that, I want to dissect the data dictionary with all of us in this space so that we can understand what are the different elements or components that go into building, creating, and understanding a data dictionary. After that, we'll look at a couple of examples so that you can understand the nuance and just how varied data dictionaries can be, so and how other organizations have created them and customized them to meet their own needs. After that, I do want to walk you through kind of a checklist and things to have in mind to build a successful data dictionary. And then, my friends, you will get to get your hands a little dirty in an activity where you will be able to create a mini data dictionary. So I know this may be a lot of new information. I truly wholeheartedly believe in playing with the materials and playing with the learning. So I want to make sure that you have that opportunity to do so in this space before you go out into the wild, go back to your organizations, are trying to build your own data dictionary from scratch without ever having any prior experience doing so. After that, we'll close with a couple of wrap-up items at the end and a survey. So let's get into the thick of it. What exactly is a data dictionary? To kick things off, I want to first say what a data dictionary is not. So it is not going to be our magic wand. It will not serve as our end all be all to resolve every single data woe that we have. But having this document in place can help to bring a lot more clarity to our data and will help to reduce a number of the common issues, challenges, or pain points that we saw during our icebreaker. So this tool can help to mitigate a lot of those issues by creating more consistency in how we're formatting our data across our organizations, helping to close and kind of narrow some of those knowledge gaps when it comes to understanding where our data is housed, which I saw as one of the bigger pain points across this group. It can also help to clarify and define specific data terms so that we're building that common and shared language together so that that language doesn't just reside with us and we become the only ones who are the experts in understanding the data that we're working with, but how do we bring others into the fold of understanding the terms and the definitions of the data that we work with and that we're collecting within our organization? And then beyond that, how do we also use this tool to allow us to communicate all of the data that we're collecting in-house, whether it's communicating internally with staff or communicating externally with partners? I know sometimes, especially with grant opportunities, it may be hard to rack our brains and think about what is all the data that we're already collecting so that we're not duplicating any data collection processes or so that we know quickly where to find them. So this document can help to serve those purposes, to cover those gaps and to cover some of those deficits. But again, this is not a magic wand to be the end all be all. There will still be some data woes that exist even outside of what this document is intended to help resolve. But this document can help resolve a good number of common issues that we typically see across our data practice spaces. So in order for us to really understand a data dictionary, I wanted to first dissect three key terms that really go into further understanding a data dictionary. So the first key term is data, which is just simply put facts and statistics that are collected for our reference or for analysis. The second key term I want us to dissect and understand going into this is dictionary, which is a book or an electronic source that lists the words of a language, typically in alphabetical order, and gives them meaning or gives the equivalent words in a different language, often also providing information about how we pronounce those words, about the origin and the history of those words, and the usage of those words. And then the third term, which may not be as familiar to us, is metadata. And this is simply a set of data that describes and gives information about other data. So simply put, metadata is data about data. So hopefully dissecting and understanding these three key terms getting into the session will help us to think about data dictionaries from the context of isolating these terms, data, dictionary, and metadata, so that we can now begin to understand that a data dictionary is likely a place where we're providing meaning and definitions to facts and data about data that we're collecting. Or in other words, a data dictionary is simply a set of information describing the contents, the format, and the structure of a database and the relationship between its elements used to control access to and manipulation of the database. It provides metadata specific to different data elements, such as the records that we're collecting, and that means it can contain the valid values, our record values, and a full text description. So all of that jargon, all of that technical definition and language, just to simply say that in a nutshell, a data dictionary is simply a repository of metadata or data about data that gives our data clear meaning, definitions, and descriptions for how we're talking about, how we're thinking about the data that we are collecting. So hopefully I didn't lose you, but just in case I did, this is where we're now going to start to break down the elements of the data dictionary. So that was the technical definition. That's understanding the Webster Dictionary version of what is a data dictionary. But now I want to move to understanding what is a data dictionary from the different components and elements that make it up. So the first one is going to be data fields and attributes. And this is simply the names of your data elements. So if you think about an intake form, if you think about a registration form, this is going to be things like client age, donation amount, date of birth, name. So this is going to be all the names that are actually the data points that you're collecting. The next element in our data dictionary is the actual definition and description. So again, the entire point of today's session is to understand data dictionaries, but also from the standpoint of building a common language, which means we need to define those terms and give them definitions and descriptions. So your definitions should be clear, and it should really point out what exactly the data element means and how it should be interpreted. So this should not be something that your audience or your staff or even external members are guessing at. What is this definition? What does it mean? The definition should spell it out and should be plain as day for them to take away, walk away, and understand what exactly they're looking at and talking about. The next data element is going to be data types. So data types is going to be specifically the kind of values that can be stored. So is this data type a text? So if I'm asking about date of birth, that would typically be numerical. If I'm asking for first and last name, that would typically be written out as characters or text. So this is going to allow whoever's looking at your data dictionary to understand what exactly data type and format should this be written in, which leads us into data formats, which we'll typically see when we're thinking about dates. So when you're looking at format, which seem to be the most consistent pain point for this group, your data dictionary will actually clearly spell out and identify exactly how something should be formatted. So if you're looking at, I know I saw one of the examples in the chat was around gift cards. If you're looking at how your staff should be putting in gift card amounts, you can write an example of the data format with the dollar sign, with the cent amount, however that should be formatted. You can clearly spell that out so that it's consistent across your databases or consistent across however you're looking at and pulling your data. But data format is most typically seen when we're thinking about dates. So again, whether it's date of birth, whether it's today's date, whether it's last date of client intake or last date that they receive services, this is where you can clearly spell out that we would like our dates to be written and structured as month, day, year, or if you reverse them, day, month, year. You can clearly spell out how you want your data to be formatted to create that consistency and to create that ease of use in how you're pulling and looking at your data moving forward. The next element is going to be looking at valid values and constraints. So these are going to be predefined values or limitations that the data elements can have. For example, is this data element going to be from a drop-down list that your audience is selecting from? Is this data element maybe a series of checkboxes where they can choose multiple items? Or is it one item chosen only and it's multiple choice? You get to identify what is the specific constraint or limitation for this data element. That way, if anyone goes to replicate this data source, they know exactly how to create it and they know the exact limitations and valid values to add for this element. And then the last thing that makes up our data dictionaries for the most part is going to be identifying relationships between fields. So this is really identifying how one data element relates to another. So you can say our client ID is linked to client information, or this particular date of birth is linked to client information. In some data dictionaries, I've also seen the relationship field used to identify a data point or an element that links to another data source or another database. So you can say client ID is linked to client information in this one source, but it's also linked to something else in another database. So that way someone can understand all the areas and instances in which client ID is being utilized and where they can find those other instances as well, because it has a relationship beyond just probably one intake form or beyond just one singular point of entry where you're collecting that information. So these are the 6 most common elements that we've typically or more traditionally have seen in a data dictionary, but this is by no means an end-all be-all list. This is not where you need to limit yourself by any means. And understanding these 6 key elements will also allow you to understand where your nuance fits and how you want to build a data dictionary that works the best for your organization. So you may find in building your own data dictionary that valid values and constraints is not something you need to know, but maybe knowing another element is something that you'd rather have in your data dictionary, and you can add it there. And when we look at examples, I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. But just to say, this is a starting place. This is not the list by any means. So as we're talking about data dictionaries and as data is in the name, I also wanted to reserve this space to just quickly go over understanding and being mindful of all the points of entry by which you can find your data. Because again, in a nutshell, our data dictionary is simply a repository of the data that we store and that we're collecting. So it would make sense for us to understand what are all the various points of entry by which our data can come into our organizations. So similar to the list we just looked at previously, this by no means is the end all be all list, but this is a great point of reference and a great starting place as you're setting out to make your data dictionary. Do I need to look at data points from our internal records? Should I pull specific forms, either client forms, patient forms, youth forms, observational forms that I know we need to pull from to understand the data that would go into my data dictionary? Do we have a number of questionnaires and surveys, or maybe we're utilizing public records? So being mindful of all the points of entry by which you collect your data will help you to create a more rounded out and successful data dictionary that is more comprehensive of the data that you're actually collecting on a day-to-day basis, on a weekly basis, quarterly, annually, you name it. But understanding the different ways by which you're collecting your data will allow you to further build out a data dictionary that's more representative of all the data you're collecting. And then I'd also be remiss if I didn't hit on dirty data. So dirty data strikes us all at one point or another. These are some of the 7 most common types of dirty data, whether it's duplicated, insecure, inconsistent, or even hoarded data. So dirty data can live in a number of different ways, in a number of different places, but having the data dictionary in place just further serves to help us mitigate this issue as well. So I won't call out every single 7 dirty data type listed on here, but one of the ones, or some of the ones I do want to bring notice to, is outdated data. And a little bit, I'll talk about having regular maintenance of your data dictionary. Having that will allow you to see any outdated data that no longer serves you. Maybe you had an old intake form, and at some point down the road, you decided we actually don't need to collect this information, but it may still live within your data dictionary. So that'll allow you to see and capture anything that may be outdated, anything that no longer serves you, or any irrelevant data that you're capturing from the client or the patient standpoint. Incomplete data is going to be any missing records. So your data dictionary will also allow you to see, we actually have had a good number of date of births that have been blank or have not been completed. Let's go back and revisit why that may be happening. And so it'll just allow you to kind of be a little curious, to dig a little deeper, and to lean forward a little bit and understanding where that is stemming from. I also want to say any inconsistent data. So that goes back to whether we're talking about inconsistencies in formatting or inconsistencies in what's being collected, or what may not be collected. So the consistency is going to come in creating those standardized processes and creating the formal understanding of how you want to format and write out and describe your data from beginning to end. So again, dirty data can strike for any of us. It can come for any of us, but having more tools and processes to better outline, describe, and understand your data will serve to further mitigate a lot of these types of dirty data that typically comes up when we're looking at our data. So now I want to get into a couple of examples so that we can actually see and put some visuals to everything I've been talking about. I know I'm a visual learner, so I prefer putting everything I'm learning to something I can actually visually interpret it to. So this itself is not a data dictionary. This is just a section of a parent registration form at a youth-focused organization. And so here we can see that they are asking standard intake and standard parent and guardian information, such as the parent's name, what is their relationship to the child or the member, do they have the same address, contact information, and then employer information. So nothing out of the ordinary here. But I want us to look at this standard parent information form from the lens of a data dictionary. So here we can see this is their data dictionary, and we can see some of the elements that I listed earlier, such as field and attribute. And so for field and attribute, they've listed the exact same names that they've used on the parent information form, such as contact name, contact information, relationship to the youth or member, and their employer. Next to that, we see another familiar field, which is the relationship. So I can see, because this is information specifically written into the parent information section, all of this information is going to relate to parent information. But if we were looking at maybe the entire data dictionary for their entire parent registration form, we could see parent information in one area, we could see youth information in another area, and maybe we'd see other in another area. But all this is tying back to the relationship that this particular element, data element, has within the greater form. Next to that, we can see description. So for contact first name, they've written out the description, should be the parent and guardian first name. And then beyond that, we see our definitions, which is first name of person responsible for the member. So we can see where this is easily and very clearly defining and laying out what exactly each data element means from beginning to end. And so, as I mentioned earlier, that list of 6 data elements that we looked at is not the end all be all list. So you can see that this example doesn't use all 6 elements. They've only used 4 out of the 6. And beyond that, they also have 2 additional rows that they found more beneficial for them. So the first additional row that they have is letting them know whether this question is required and mandatory, whether this question is optional. And then when you look at authorized to pick up, you can see that one of these questions is not even in use. So that's letting them know, are we using this question? Is it mandatory? Is it optional? And then beyond that, they have another column that they've included, which is letting them know the sort order. So allowing them to see exactly what order these questions are showing up in. So again, if we were looking at the comprehensive entire data dictionary for the entire registration form, we would see the sort order change a bit as we're looking from beginning to end of youth information, of medical information, so on and so forth. But this is helping them to understand what order these go in addition to are these questions required. So again, just hopefully painting the picture of some of the nuance that can take shape across your data dictionaries. Another example we have is a general intake form. And so here we can see we still have our field and attribute. And again, our field and attribute names should not be something nondescript that we can't usually pick up. So we know surname, first name, address, date of birth. Beyond that, they have now added data type. So we can see for license and ID, this data type is an integer or number. Whereas we can see for surname and first name, this data type is text. And then down at the very bottom, for date of birth, we can see that this data type is date and time. So that's a new element that this particular organization has decided is important for them to know whenever they're looking at and referencing their data dictionary. Beyond that, they've also added another data element, which is the data format. And so we can see under data format for license ID, it's in for number. And then down at the very bottom, we can see they've written out specifically how their date of birth should be formatted as day, month, year. And then the last familiar element we see here is again our definition and description. So anyone picking this up who may not understand what is the acronym DOB, I can see the driver's date of birth. Now, this organization has also only used 4 of the data elements out of the entire 6 that we discussed, and they've also added 2 additional elements that are more beneficial for them to have readily available within their data dictionary. The first one being field size. So how many characters can someone actually write within this particular data element? And then the second one being an example. So if anyone has never seen what a driver's license ID number looks like, you can see an example here. If someone has never seen what a phone number looks like, you can see an example here. So they've also provided examples. That way, anyone looking at the data dictionary can know exactly how this should be formatted based on this example provided here. The third example I have is a little different. So it looks very simple, bare bones, to the point. They've only included 3 data elements here, or 3 data dictionary elements here, and that is the variable name. That's the data type, so numerical versus character, and then, of course, their description. So anyone can pick this up and understand what is ABS, absorption factor. However, where this data dictionary starts to break the mold a little bit is the fact that this is actually a data dictionary stored within an entire PDF. And so the full document really more so resembles a detailed index that you would typically find at the end of the book. And the data dictionary is just one component that is housed within that comprehensive PDF. And so within the entire PDF, they've also added policies and procedures that go hand in hand with their data dictionary and how those within their organization should be utilizing the data dictionary as well as keeping them up to date on standard policies and procedures. So they've lumped it all into one document because they want everyone who's looking at policies and procedures to also be able to look at their data dictionary side by side. So this is where they're starting to break the mold just a bit, where we see, okay, our data dictionaries don't have to be a standalone document. They can be a document within a larger body of work. And then for our last example, we have NASA who like truly broke the mold across anything that we've seen so far with these examples. So because NASA has such a complex data system, they've actually dedicated an entire web page that houses their various data dictionaries, and they've even included a search bar function so that their employees could search across the different data dictionaries to easily find what they're looking for. So you can have multiple data dictionaries, but I will say, and we'll talk about this a little bit later as well, if you do want to have multiple data dictionaries, make sure that there's a way to somehow link or connect them so that your staff aren't looking for different data dictionaries in different folders in different places. So this is a great example where NASA has created one web page that houses all of their data dictionaries. So even they have distinct and separate data dictionaries, they are all located in one easily accessed location. And with that search bar function, it makes it easier for staff to search and type in keywords or key terms instead of having to click and look into each individual data dictionary to find what they're looking for. So these were the four examples that I have for us to look at in terms of understanding the real world application of data dictionaries. But again, I really hope that you're able to start to see the nuance and the differences and the variants that are seen across these data dictionaries. So whether your data dictionary is one document and it's a comprehensive Excel file, or it's an entire web page, you can start to weave and ebb and flow the different data elements for your data dictionary that are necessary for your organization. And just as we saw in a couple of the other examples, you don't have to use every data element, and you can also start to incorporate different data elements that aren't a part of the six that I originally showed. So now that we have a lot more groundwork in terms of understanding the technical definition of a data dictionary, we've seen it in action. How exactly do I go about building a data dictionary, Ashley? Well, I'm glad you all asked. So I've created a checklist for success. So having these elements in play will give you a higher likelihood of creating a successful and more robust data dictionary. The first one, and it's in theme with the holiday season, is make your list and check it twice. So when I say make your list, I mean using that first data dictionary element, lists out all of your attributes. What are the names, the client information, the client ID number, the date of birth? List those items out first before you begin building out the other elements of your data dictionary. So I don't mean put client name, put the definition, put the data type, put this and that. No, make your entire list. That way you'll be able to check your list twice, but also make sure you're not missing any key, pertinent, and crucial data elements and attributes that need to be included in your data dictionary. My next tip for success is prioritize data sets that are crucial to your organization. So I know in the spaces that we work in, we collect a lot of data from a lot of different avenues and a lot of different spaces. So as you're making your list, what I don't want you to do is make an entire comprehensive list all the way from A to Z that includes your programmatic efforts, that includes data from your finance department, that includes data from your HR department. No, I want you to prioritize the data set that is critical for your organization. So that means if you work at a youth-based organization or if you work at an organization that focuses on financial stability, it wouldn't exactly make sense for you to prioritize maybe volunteer hours or prioritize donor information. Maybe it does if that is crucial and critical for your organization, but for the most part, focus on maybe more of the programmatic areas, the things that you know you're looking at on a daily basis to make your organization run, ebb, and flow. Prioritize those areas first so that this step doesn't become an overwhelming and cumbersome process. What I always say is don't clean the whole house from top to bottom, pick one room at a time. So whether that one room is looking at your programmatic efforts, whether that one room is looking at your operations data, or whether that one room is looking at your finance or HR data, pick that one room that is critical to your organization, clean that room first, clean. But what I mean is create your data dictionary around that data set first. And once you have that room in order, then move on to the next room and the next room and the next room. And the next thing you know, your whole house will be clean, but don't start setting out to clean the entire house from scratch. The next tip for success I have is Keep it simple, especially if you're newer to data dictionaries. This is the first time you're hearing about or really understanding in greater detail about data dictionaries. As I said earlier, the beauty of a data dictionary is not just all that it can help us do and clarify and clean up within our organizations, but also the ease of access that it has and the affordability that it has. So you can create a data dictionary through an Excel document, through Google Sheets, and a number of other formats that allow you to list out and prioritize elements in that way. But keep it simple, keep it accessible, because the more accessible it is, the easier it will be for you to create that common language across your organization. Which leads into my next tip for success, which is check in with different departments and team members who work directly with the data that you're looking at to ensure elements are not missing. Because the last thing you want to do is work in a silo and you think you have all of the attributes listed, but then you go to showcase your data dictionary and it may not be useful for your audience or for that particular department if certain elements are missing. Also, in the space of co-creation, you begin to create data stewards, which means that when it comes time to maintaining and keeping up with this document, it doesn't just rest on your shoulders. And then my last tip, well, second to last tip, is once you have your list complete for just that one room that you're looking at, once you've completely written out your list, then begin to build out those other data dictionary elements. Once you have your list identified, then start working in the definitions, start identifying and looking at the data types, start adding in the valid values, and start considering what other data elements you want this document to have in it. And then after that, maintenance, 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 y'all. This document will only be as relevant as you keep up with it. And so maintenance is so important and crucial that it has its own slide. So my tips for maintenance is one, of course, review it regularly and make sure that you're updating your data dictionary anytime you have a new data field or if there's new data, or if you change the definitions. So I know sometimes when we're working with a data set, we may start out as defining something one way, but the further we get into our work, that definition slowly changes. We now understand and interpret it a different way. Make sure that that is tracked in your data dictionary as well. My next tip for maintenance is, again, involve your team. When you're able to identify those data stewards, it helps to take the work off of just a party of one. And if you have maybe a small committee of other individuals who are invested in this, it helps the maintenance be, it helps to maintain the accuracy of the maintenance, but it also helps to ensure that the maintenance is actually done when you have accountability buddies, right? I'll say even going beyond having data stewards for the maintenance part, it also helps to create others who care about this aspect of the work because they'll likely become champions for your data dictionary and for your other data efforts so that it's likely to become a document that is living and breathing and is actually used throughout your organization so that it doesn't just sit in a SharePoint file where no one may know where it's at or be accessing it. And then my last tip for your maintenance is just updating or even consider creating a new data dictionary entirely whenever you begin to implement a new data system, a new database, or you take on a major data project that is now introducing unique or different data elements that is not that's kind of breaking the mold of something you already capture. So you can decide to create a new data dictionary or you can decide to update your existing one. But just keep in mind the different checkpoints that you want to set out and create for when you should be maintaining your data dictionary. And I will say, if you're typically an organization who introduces new policies pretty regularly, or if you are constantly moving and taking on large data projects pretty regularly, I would say have a more frequent checkpoint for when you're maintaining and managing and reviewing your data dictionary. Versus if you work in an organization where policies are pretty consistent, you're not taking on major data projects as often, you can get away with a quarterly, a biannual review point, but just making sure that the point of time in which you're reviewing your data dictionary adds and aligns up with how your organization moves and how often or how quickly you take on new data related elements and projects. So, the last thing I do want to hit on before we get into some more hands-on opportunities is looking at how we are thinking about scaling our data dictionaries. So, I know we work with a vast number of partners, some of them on the smaller side, some of them on the larger side. And so, one model or way of creating a data dictionary is not going to work for everyone. And so, I hope you're understanding that this is not meant to be a one-size-fits-all document or tool by any means. So, if you work at a smaller organization or if you have a simple simple data structure, even if it's at a larger organization. If you have a simple data structure, I do have specific recommendations for you. So one, focus on your essential data. So really looking at the names, addresses, donor information, date of birth, what are those common reoccurring key data elements that you know need to be within your data dictionary. Having those as your staple is going to make sure that this form and this document is something that is readily used by your staff. I would also recommend avoiding overly technical, overly jargony language because one, we're working to create a common language here and making sure that this is a document that anyone of our staff can pick up and utilize and interpret, especially for our smaller organizations, where you might be a party of one who is doing the data work within your spaces, or even a small party of two or three. The last thing you want is to create this document that still becomes you have to become the one who is interpreting it because others don't understand it. So I know we can use technical and jargony language. I'm going to implore you to break away from that. And if you have a hard time of rephrasing some of your language and it tends to lean more on the side of jargon or technical, I'd say use our good friends with AI. Just say, hey, make this or translate this into a way where anyone can understand and interpret it. Utilize those resources to help you write and create a document that will be more likely used without you having to be the sole person responsible for making sure it gets used. My next step for folks who are at a smaller organization or who have a simpler data structure is to involve those key stakeholders from each department early on. Again, I know we typically have smaller teams within this category of folks, so the more people you can get on board, the more likely that this will be used throughout your organization, but also for that maintenance, for that upkeep purpose. The more accountability buddies and the more people you have involved in this and engaged in it, the more likely that this will become a living, breathing document that is used throughout your organization. And then overall, the name of the game for our folks in this category is keep it accessible. We're working on that common language. We're working on making sure that others are actually using this document so that we can create more streamlined processes, more efficient processes, but also clearer understanding of our data as a whole to hopefully mitigate a number of those data pain points that we talked about at the very beginning of this session. Now, for my folks who may be at a larger organization or who may just have more complex data systems, I also have specific recommendations for you. So the first one is you may want to consider creating separate but connected data dictionaries. Now, this doesn't mean you have to NASify it and create an entire web page if that doesn't work for you or isn't going to be the most accessible thing for you, but it may mean having an entire SharePoint folder dedicated to your data dictionaries where anyone or where most people throughout your organization can access it and find them. So making sure that they're not living and housed throughout all these different places where no one can find them. Also, if they're able to communicate to each other and be connected for some of those shared data points that are tracked within multiple departments or tracked across multiple program areas, I recommend connecting them where you can if possible. And so if you're looking at creating separate data dictionaries because you have a more complex data system or you're at a large organization, I would typically recommend creating a different data dictionary either by department. So if you know your HR finance folks are going to be looking at different things within their data dictionary compared to maybe your operations folks or your more program involved folks, create those different data dictionaries for them so that way you can still add those nuance and complexities so that both audience can get what they need from their specific data dictionary. I'd also recommend creating separate data dictionaries if you have separate databases or if you have multiple major programmatic areas that you need to have a specific lens and focus on when you're looking across your data dictionaries. The next tip I would advise for this group is to look at including more of those detailed components. So this group, I'd say, really think about breaking from the mold of the standard 6 data dictionary elements I reviewed earlier on. So you may want to include things like who is the data owner, meaning who is the person and the point of contact that I should turn to if I have questions about this data, if I want to know more about this data. You also may want to include an update frequency. So identifying this data element needs to be updated quarterly, biannually, annually. And then second to that, I would also say consider adding a log. So I've seen a number of data dictionaries that actually have a log of when this data was last updated and when this particular data element was last seen, reviewed, touched to make sure that it is staying up to date. So if you have larger, more complex systems, I would implore you to add some of those more nuanced elements within your data dictionary because it'll just further serve to help maintain the accuracy and validity of your data dictionary and make sure that it's actually a living, breathing document that you can continue to turn to and utilize. My next piece of advice for this group is to create those standards and those guidelines. So similar to the example we looked at here with the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, where this is one component of a larger PDF document that goes over their policies and procedures. You may want to do something similar where you know your data dictionary is going to be also surrounded by your standards, by your procedures, by your policies around how individuals should be either utilizing the data dictionary or how they should be working with your data as a whole. And then my last recommendation, and this is really for everyone, schedule your regular updates, please. I implore you. But for this group in particular, also consider having users who are trained in this document as well, because you may be more likely to use some jargony language, to use more technical language and terms in general. You may want to have a point where others are actually engaged properly with how to use this document, how to understand it, and how to interpret it. So that way it just further lives and seeps within the culture of your organization. So those are my two scaling systems. You are more than welcome to fall in between both categories. You're more than welcome to pull from this area, or ignore it altogether and say, I have a completely different system of how I want to create my data dictionary. But these are just some starting points, some guidelines to hopefully give you all a little bit more direction in how you can scale this depending on the size or the complexity of your data within your organizations. Now, hopefully, the moment we've all been waiting for, we're going to get into our activity. I've talked a lot about data dictionaries, and don't worry, I'll still be here if you need my help or a guidance or questions. But what we're going to do now is put you into breakout rooms of groups roughly between 3 to 5 each. And within those breakout rooms, you will have 12 minutes to build your own mini data dictionary. And so when you do build your own data dictionary, you'll be given a scenario, you'll be given a prompt, so you're not just out there floating in the wild, but there will be a couple of you working on this together. So you'll also be in the space of groupthink, of sharing with other minds, so that it feels more like creating a committee, so that it feels more like getting others from different departments involved in the co-creation process of your data dictionary. And then when we return, we will like to hear out from each group, depending on how many groups we end up having in total. But before we break out everyone into their groups, I do want to share the activity so you can see it in detail. Okay, so those of you who've been with us for a little while, you may be no stranger to endless possibilities. This is our semi-fictitious, and we found out is a real organization, by which we build fake data set around, and we just use this as a space for us to play with and sink our teeth into the data a little bit more. But our friends at Endless Possibility are a pet adoption and animal shelter, so that's what their data is going to pertain around. Um, Jessica, would you mind adding, actually, I think I can add it into the chat. You will all have access to this document. So once you're broken into your groups, you're going to be put into one of three scenarios. So scenario one is going to be in pink, where you're looking at their adoption survey and turning it into a data dictionary. Scenario two is going to be yellow, where you're looking at the quarterly data and turning that into a data dictionary. And then scenario three is going to be in blue, where you're looking at their pet training evaluation form and helping them turn that into a data dictionary. So there will be two groups per scenario if we have that many people. I actually don't know how many we have on, but yep, we'll have two groups per scenario. So please be mindful of whether you are in group 1A or group 1B. For scenario two, it'll be 2A, 2B, and then scenario C, or for scenario three, it will be 3A, 3B. And then you also have the data elements for reference as you're building out your data dictionary. But please use this as your time to engage in the space to learn more about data dictionaries in general. And hopefully this will give you a good base point to start creating your own and bringing that back to your organization. So we'll go ahead and put you into your breakout rooms, and we'll see you in about 12 minutes.
Hey, Ashley, will you please make the link shareable, I mean editable, so folks can
Yes,
edit?
I can.
Thank you. And then I think shuffling folks, because some folks drop when they hear the word breakout room, which I get it. I hear you, I see you. So to our brave souls who are staying in, we see you, we appreciate you. Y'all are the best. So let me let me finish this, fix this up a little bit.
Before y'all go, can someone confirm if you're able to edit the document now? I see a yes. Okay, thank you.
I think I've got it. We got a 1A, a 1B, a 2A, a 2B, a 3A, a 3B. Alrighty, y'all. We'll see you on the other
Perfect.
side of 12 minutes.
Smaller as we progress.
I figured that might happen. You were a small but mighty group.
Yeah.
Okay, Jessica, is this everyone? You're muted.
We are all back. Yes.
Okay, okay. Welcome, welcome, welcome back, everyone. I deeply apologize. Zoom made me a liar. So, Jessica and I wanted to extend the time, and we did a quick Google search if we could extend it once we already said it. And technically, Google was the liar. It said that we would be able to keep the rooms open after the time ran out, but that was not the case. So hopefully you were able to get some good work done on your mini data dictionaries. I see a lot of great work written out in here. So we're just going to kind of randomly go and hop around one by one. Actually, let's not do randomly because then I'm going to forget who has and hasn't gone. So we're going to go in order. But I'd love to hear a share out of just what your thought process was throughout creating your mini data dictionary. What was some of the discussions had, and then what you ultimately ended up with on your sheets here. So we'll start with group 1A. And so for everyone else's point of reference, their prompt was to work with Endless Possibilities adoption survey. So they had to determine the field name and attribute, data types, definition, and valid values and constraints based on the survey questions provided to them, but also propose different data elements that Endless Possibilities may want to capture across their data dictionary. So can we have a spokesperson from group 1A?
I can go, Ashley.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
So for
okay.
our survey, we focused on the information. Oh, unless you want to go, Susan.
No, I was having trouble finding the mute button, but you
Okay.
can. I was the person typing, but go ahead.
So for our survey, it was looking at, we really wanted to capture information about the types of animals that are being adopted, looking at gender, species, breed, age, size, and we even added extra in terms of if the dog or cats are vaccinated and also if they're spayed and neutered. I know some shelters require that information be captured, others don't. So kind of just try to have some sort of streamline there where we're capturing that information for individuals who are wanting to adopt animals. And then for gender, our data type was text, for species, text, breed, text, age was numerical, size was also text. We broke that down into small, medium, and large. And then as we dive deeper into define what small, medium, and large is based on the weight of the animals. Vaccinations would be a combination of text and numerical. Text, the vaccination, the numerical, the dates that the dog or cat may have had them or they are due for them. And then for spayed and neutered, we got to text, and that's as far as we got. And then for definitions, well, for gender, the sex of the animal, whether it's male or female, species, the type of animal, whether it's a cat or dog. For breed, it's like the genetic makeup of the dog. That is a dog can be a combination of a lot of things. So is a cat. So really defining what those breeds are. For age, how old the animal is, and then for size, kind of going back to defining what small, medium, and large is depending on different weights. So there's some sort of format, uniformity across that. We know if a dog weighs between X amount of pounds or a cat does, they would be considered small, medium, or large. And then for vaccinations, gonna just go back to the dates and the types. And yeah, that's as far as we got in terms of what information we think would be helpful for individuals or for the shelter to have based off the surveys that they would be doing for adoption.
This is great work, y'all. So, from this experience of creating now this mini data dictionary, I'd love to hear kind of like the ease or difficulty of this process for this group, since it was based off of like survey questions that were pretty loosely defined at the point.
I mean, I don't know about the rest of you, but it seemed pretty straightforward. Everyone just kind of jumped in and said, well, we would want to know the gender and the species. You know, it was pretty smooth for our group, I think, to get put this together.
Yeah, so I one love to hear the ease of able to kind of get this done, write it out in the data dictionary format, but hopefully just pointing out from the survey perspective, it's pretty easy to translate it over and create kind of that one-to-one relation, but also create more clarity in is this text, is it numerical? What is the actual working definition? And then once you would get into the valid values as well, it's not difficult. It just takes a little bit of time, but when you're able to do it in a group setting, someone takes on one component, someone takes on another component, it really helps to lift that burden a lot. Thank you, Group 1A. Can we now hear from Group 1B who had the same prompt, but I'd love to hear your own take, your own style, and how this process was for you all.
I can go. So,
Okay, perfect. You go right ahead.
I was gonna say, we took a bit of a different approach and had, I would say a lot of discussion on just even the first question because we were trying to like figure out how we wanted to do the definition. And so we did it pretty much by like, I guess, the questions of looking at the satisfaction, the accuracy of the information, how comprehensible the survey was, and then our like analysis of like the staff competence. So I would say for our group, it was a bit more of a like productive struggle, just kind of going back and forth on the data, not necessarily the data types, but like the definitions of how we wanted to define everything. And then once we kind of got past that first, back and forth, it became a little bit easier to do the um, values and constraints. But we just went by question and tried to think about how this could look in the dictionary.
I appreciate that insight a lot because I think that's a reality of creating the data dictionary. Again, a point of this is to create that common language. So, how do you clearly define something, one, so that it's an easy to understand definition, but also in a way that really kind of codifies what this element is? And so, how does it, one, translate to your audience, but still maintain the overall meaning and definition? Also, other people can have different definitions of satisfaction. So how are you going to concretely define satisfaction or even for the first group, size so that everyone can easily read, translate, understand it, but it still holds true to the information you need to take in for your organization. So I appreciate that insight around, yeah, no, the definitions can be the most cumbersome part because it's a group thing. It's a group conversation around how we create this common language. Thank you, both groups from scenario 1. So now let's move into scenario 2, where this group looked at quarterly data from Endless Possibilities. And so they were tasked with helping to identify critical data for this organization to prioritize since they are creating their first data dictionary, and then also determine the data attributes, the data type, and a description. So let's hear from group 2A. Mary, you're muted, but I see you. There you go.
I wasn't sure if Imelda wanted to go. Well, first we had a time just trying to type into the form. So we just really looked at some of those total fields, and really just looked at, I guess my confusion is if this is a field, it's quarterly data, but what if it's a field that you really don't want? I mean, it's a sum of other fields possibly, and so you don't want people messing with it.
Yeah, no, I agree. The quarterly was just for the ease of getting the data in like a truncated version, but that is an entirely valid point. Yes.
So yeah, and not knowing the fields that they have. So we just sort of went through and said, okay, here are the total adoptions, total vaccinations, total new application, and our volunteer hours, and looking at a sum of those fields. Um, so anyway, I don't know. We we looked at 2B and they looked like they were really getting to it.
Yeah, I think, but that's also a very valid point too, because within your organizations, sometimes once we start pulling data, we may find, why do we only have this recorded quarterly? Why do we only have this recorded biannually? Where is the nuance within the data? And so the beauty of this process is going through and understanding, are we actually able to understand everything we need to get out of our data if it's reported in this way or in this frequency or in this format? So even though I did it for the sake of truncating the data, that's also a very real reality of when we start digging into our data and we find, hold on, I don't actually know what's where and how we can get the most out of this. And then that's so funny, the point of comparison between both groups. It's completely fine. Both groups tackled it in their own ways and processes, and it really highlights the differences of how you prioritize one element over another. So thank you for sharing. Can we hear from group 2B?
I can go. So we picked for our data points the total adoptions, new foster applications, training sessions, and the quarter. Just so that way you could kind of break down the adoptions by quarter and see, like, is there a trend here? Is there a certain time of the year where we get more adoptions or less adoptions, and being able to look at the data kind of in that narrow of a mindset. So for the data types we did for the quarter, alphanumeric. For the total adoptions, it's going to be numbers. For new foster applications, also numbers, and the same for training sessions. And then for our descriptions, we broke down the quarters by like which time of the year the quarters were. So Q1 is January through March and so forth, because everyone's quarters are different. So making sure that everyone understands, like, this is a specific quarter we're talking about. For the description of adoptions, it's the total number of animals adopted from the organization. For foster apps, it's the total number of completed applications received. And then for training sessions, the total number of foster training sessions delivered by the organization. We kind of took a guess at who would be trained in that and just like made an assumption.
Yeah, I love the specific call out to in the description section. That's where I really see a lot of your detail coming out. But especially around identifying the specific months between quarters, because everyone's quarters are different. For someone else, their Q1 could be July through September. So I love that clear definition. And that really is the entire point and purpose of the data dictionary, is making sure anyone who picks up this document can clearly understand, what do you mean by quarter? What do you mean by total adoption? So on and so forth. Thank you both to both groups for scenario 2. Now let's move on to our final scenario, where this group looked at a pet training evaluation form that was set up as a Likert scale. And so they had to identify the field and attribute names, the field formats, definition and valid values, as well as think about 2 department leads who would serve as data stewards or champions to be involved in this process with them. So let's first hear from group 3A.
I'll go. So we did, for the field and attributes, we did commands and data type on all of the field attributes. There was just, we tried to stick it to just one little word as much as possible, right? And then on the data type, obviously it's going to be text. The data format was the value, and the definition is where we put more of the question, so it could be identified to the field. And then on the valid value and constraints, it's going to be a scale, because there's several. I noticed on the other group, they did a likely scale, which I didn't put that in there, but that's fine. And then we did not get as far because we had to take time to figure out what we were doing and how to do it. But we didn't get as far as the department leads. But I would think, just in my own experience, that's one of the toughest parts, is maintaining this, unless you have an actual data analyst, constantly looking at these. But I would say maybe some in the department of the data analyst department.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
So for the field attribute name, I think you did a beautiful job. Like you said, those questions were way too long to put that as the entire attribute name. So you all discussed, you came up with a system that made the most sense where someone internally likely could kind of see this one word and be like, okay, I know what this is, but just in case I don't, you did provide the full definition so they could crosswalk it and understand, okay, I see leash, but what about leashes? And then they can go just straight across to see, is the pet walking on a leash, yes or no, or on the scale. And then in terms of the maintenance, I agree. I think the one thing is it doesn't even take a data analyst because all of us in this room, none of us have to be data analysts. It's a simple document to create, to form. The hard part is how do you get others brought in? And so that could truly be someone who is on the operations side who wants to see this data updated frequently because it's crucial for how they want to maintain the operations throughout the organization. They don't have to be a data analyst necessarily, but they have to have that buy-in. They have to have that invested interest to help maintain, ask questions. Something as simple as asking, hey, when's the last time we looked at the data dictionary? Could then prompt everyone who's part of your little committee or team to think, oh, let's go ahead and brush that off really quick and let's make sure it's up to date. So I agree. The maintenance is truly going to be, that is where the work really begins with the data dictionary. But I think really identifying those crucial invested, or really identifying those invested partners is the crucial key part. Yeah. Thank you all so much. And then can we have our group from 3B round us out?
Hi, I'm Emily. Our group, we had 3B, and first of all, I want to say that Jason was typing because I couldn't edit and he had to leave. So as we go through this, it got a little bit more brief. So for ours, we went with pretty, like for the field attribute and everything, we went with just like Q1 and then like a key kind of word or phrase, identified everything. It's the same. I think we had the easiest one. We identified everything. They're all the same. They're all text. They're all string values. We didn't get far with the definitions because Jason had to take off, but we would include more in it if we had more time. It would be a longer definition, like a real language kind of thing for people to be able to understand. And we also would have typed out all of the values on the Likert scale. But yeah, so it would have been the always whatever. But also to make it fit there. So that's what we did for ours. And then it's hard not to think of your own agency when you identify program leads or whatever. So we just tried to keep it a little bit vague, but the program staff, we'd identify someone from there because we imagined that they would be collecting the data, and then whatever team uses the data, someone from that as well. So yeah, so that's what we tried to be loose about it a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. So I know you said you felt like y'all had the long or the easiest one. I just never know because I know sometimes a lot of discussion and back and forth can take place, especially with how do we want to shorten this entire question into 1 to 2 words. But I'm happy to hear it didn't feel like it was difficult because that's kind of what I want to bring up from this is one, just the variance in the different formats and different forms you can pull to start creating your data dictionary. So one of the examples was from a survey. The other one was from a quarterly data that already exists internally. And then the last one is from an evaluation form. So 3 very different aspects of how you could collect your data. And all of them, for the most part, were pretty easy to do, pretty easy to come up with in the span of 12 minutes, like that fast, and you already can create a mini data dictionary. So this is what I really want to highlight and focus and emphasize when I say, think about cleaning your house one room at a time. Pick just that one form, that one survey, that one training evaluation form that is really a staple to your organization, and clean that one room. Put that one thing into the data dictionary and start piece by piece by piece. Start with 12 minutes, start with 30 minutes in a small group, and then it'll start to really come together. And before you know it, you'll have a fully fleshed out data dictionary. And who knows, maybe you will have a web page like NASA. I don't know. I'm not going to say you will. I'm not going to say you won't. But just to point out the ease and accessibility, and the hardest part is going to be that maintenance, and that is where the work begins. But getting this started, getting it up and going, that's the easy part. And once you do have this created, and once you have other people brought into the creation process, it's hard for them to not see the value of having this and maintaining it within your organization. So I think helping others really understand the value is going to help them be more bought in and understanding the value so that they also have a vested interest in making sure it's maintained and kept up to date. So with my remaining 7 minutes, I do want to share just two resources for helping you get started with creating your own data dictionary, whether it's in 12 minutes, whether it's in 30 minutes, you decide that. And then we'll go ahead and close out. And if I could have someone confirm that you can see my full presentation screen, I see a thumbs up, cool beans. So the first resource is actually a template from opendata.dc.gov. And so this is a downloadable Excel template. So if you want to create your data dictionary in the form of an Excel document, easy accessible, you can upload it to SharePoint, upload it into whatever shared system you have within your organization, but it already predefines and lists out those data dictionary elements. So you can go in and just start plugging in your attributes, plugging in your definitions, but it already has it formatted and kind of like partially, mostly created for you. You just have to do the manual part on actually updating and uploading your specific elements. And then the other resource I have is just an extra helping on what exactly is a data dictionary. So I wholeheartedly believe in like learning is a process. I don't believe any one person should just gain anything from one modality, from one sitting. So I do hope you are able to take a lot out of building, creating, and starting a data dictionary. But if you still have questions, of course, me and Jessica are here. But I also encourage you, seek out those other modalities of learning. Whether you prefer to learn in a blog style, prefer to hear it in a podcast, seek out those other opportunities to just soak in more information, especially if this is something that you could see benefiting your organization and you really want to begin implementing. This session is a great starting place. Truly, we went from beginning to very end of what is a data dictionary all the way to creating a mini data dictionary. But keep learning and hearing about it more than once, more than 3 times. Keep just searching and seeking this information. So if you're someone who also believes in the practice of learning and getting information from multiple sources, hearing it and understanding and digesting it in multiple ways, this is an additional resource of just in a blog style, what is a data dictionary? As well as they also have a template in a Google Sheets format. So if you work in Google Sheets and you already want to upload things into Google Sheets as opposed to Excel, I know sometimes the formatting gets a little wonky when you try to do a one-to-one direct upload. This is another format where you can use Google Sheets, and it is similarly built out with that pre-established template, and you can just go in and enter your own attributes and information. Other than that, y'all, after I wrap up this, we can take questions. But other than that, please, please, please give us your feedback. This is not a long feedback survey by any means. It's very quick, short, to the point, but please give us your feedback because it just helps Jessica and I understand where we can continue to improve and create more content that's going to be beneficial and relevant to you all. And then we also already have all of our 2025 dates listed. So this is our last 2024 session. Claps, sadness, I know, but we'll be back on the other side of the year. So we have our 2025 dates listed. I know Jessica, if you haven't already, is about to put the links in the chat, so you can go ahead and start getting registered for those. And then of course, we'll keep it at our standard 9 to 10:30 time. Make the ones you can. The ones you can, it's okay. We'll record and send them down the line later after it's recorded. But that is all I have, folks. Please take the survey. And in our remaining 4 minutes, if there are any data dictionary related questions or copy and quality related questions that we can answer, Jessica and I are here. And even if you just want to give kudos, I'm always open to that too.
Actually, could you share that link, the link for creating your
Which
own dictionary, the last one you shared in the slide?
yes. I'll upload both of those into the chat right now.
Thank you.
And then this PowerPoint will also be shared as well, so the links will be included in there too. But I will give this to y'all right here and right now. And then there's also a number of things out there too to help you manage your data dictionary. They're just paid for options, so you kind of lose a little bit of that accessibility. And when I was looking around at the paid options, they're quite steep in price point. So if you are balling on a hefty budget like that, by all means, I can give you some recommendations. But it was a pretty big entry point price. So I tried to keep it to things that were free and accessible for us to get started with. And if there aren't any questions, thank you all for joining us for our last 2024 Coffee and Quality session. We'll hopefully see you before the year ends. If not, we'll be seeing you in January of next year. Please take care, celebrate your holidays, take some time off, and enjoy the rest of your 2024 year.